In the suffocating heat of Manila, as the scorching sun filtered through the windows of the training gym, Manny Pacquiao tirelessly pounded the punching bag, sweat streaming down his focused face. The champion of 8 different weight divisions was preparing for his next fight, dedicating every second of his training to maintain his legacy as one of the greatest boxers the world had ever known. His trainers watched with admiration the determination that had transformed the poor boy from General Santos City into a global icon, a man who carried the hopes of an entire nation in his fists. That same morning, miles away in the small province of Samar, a 17-year-old boy named Bayani Magtanggol was packing his worn backpack with trembling hands. Bayani had been born with a rare muscular condition that affected his movements, making each step a battle. Despite the difficulty, his eyes shone with a determination that rivaled that of Pacquiao himself, his greatest idol since childhood. On his wall, newspaper clippings and posters of Manny told the story of admiration that had given meaning to his life in the most difficult moments. Bayani's mother, Ligaya, a widow who worked as a seamstress to support her son, watched worriedly as he stored his few belongings. The money she had saved over 3 years working double shifts would be enough only for a one-way ticket to Manila. It was all they had, but seeing the determination in her son's eyes, Ligaya knew she couldn't prevent him from pursuing his dream of meeting the man who had inspired his strength during painful treatments and sleepless nights. Meanwhile, in Pacquiao's team office, Dalisay Bituin, his new press officer, was organizing the boxer's packed schedule for the coming weeks. Between interviews, photo sessions, political commitments, and training, there wasn't a single minute available. Dalisay, newly hired and eager to impress, was determined to ensure everything went according to plan, keeping fans at a safe distance so as not to compromise Manny's preparation for the fight that could redefine his career. The lives of Manny, Bayani, and Dalisay were about to intersect in a way none of them could foresee, in a journey that would test the true meaning of inspiration and compassion. As the sun set over the Philippines, Bayani boarded an old overcrowded bus, holding tightly to the only photo he had with Pacquiao's face, crumpled from being held so much, but still the most valuable treasure he possessed in the world. The bus wound its way through the sinuous roads of the Philippines, violently shaking at every curve, making the journey even more challenging for Bayani. The pain in his legs intensified with each hour, but the young man refused to show any sign of weakness. Beside him, an elderly lady named Amihan noticed his discomfort and silently offered an improvised pillow made from her own coat, a gesture of kindness that brought tears to the boy's eyes, unaccustomed to receiving attention from strangers who normally avoided him because of his condition. The journey that should have lasted 20 hours stretched to 30 due to a strong, tropical storm that blocked several roads. Bayani watched through the foggy window as palm trees bent violently under the force of the wind, feeling that every element of nature was testing his determination. With no money for food, he carefully rationed the few crackers his mother had placed in his backpack, ignoring the hunger that tightened his stomach with each passing hour. In Manila, unaware of the young fan's journey, Manny Pacquiao was concluding another exhausting day of training. His body ached, but his mind remained focused. After training, contrary to his team's advice to rest, the boxer insisted on visiting a children's hospital on the outskirts of the city, where sick children eagerly awaited his visit. This was the true essence of Manny, a man who, despite fame and fortune, never forgot his humble origins and the importance of giving back to the people who supported him so much. Dalisay watched with growing admiration as Pacquiao dedicated hours, talking to each child in the hospital, memorizing their names and stories, distributing gifts purchased with his own money. In her years working with celebrities, she had never witnessed such sincerity and humility. As they returned to the car, she notified Manny about the dozens of fans camping outside the training gym, recommending they avoid the location to prevent commotion, a suggestion the boxer received with a gentle smile and a silent refusal. Meanwhile, Bayani's bus was finally arriving on the outskirts of Manila, under a torrential rain that transformed streets into raging rivers. The driver announced he could not continue to the city center due to flooding, leaving passengers miles from their final destinations. With his legs numb and painful after the long journey, Bayani got off the bus, feeling the impact of each raindrop, like small needles on his sensitive skin, but in his heart, the flame of hope burned stronger than ever. Under the relentless rain, Bayani slowly walked through the flooded streets of Manila, his legs protesting with each painful step. The improvised crutch he used sank into the mud, making his progress even more difficult. Hurried people passed by him, some casting pitying glances, others completely indifferent to his silent struggle. A fruit vendor named Habagat, noticing his debilitated state, offered him temporary shelter under his small, colorful tent and a ripe mango, refusing any payment when he realized the young man's situation. During the following hours, Bayani navigated the unfamiliar city, asking strangers for the location of the gym where Pacquiao trained. Some provided incorrect information, others simply shrugged, but the young man persisted, memorizing every detail of the mental map he was building. The photo of Manny, now protected in an improvised plastic bag, was occasionally consulted as a talisman that renewed his strength whenever despair threatened to overwhelm him. Meanwhile, at the training gym, Manny was concluding his last session of the day, ignoring the fatigue that weighed on his shoulders. His thoughts oscillated between the strategy for the next fight and concerns about the social projects he managed in his home province. At his side, his veteran trainer Teodoro discussed the latest technical adjustments, while Dalisay occasionally interrupted with reminders about unavoidable commitments, trying to maintain the delicate balance between the boxer's multiple responsibilities. Night was falling rapidly over Manila when Bayani finally spotted the imposing gym building, illuminated by floodlights cutting through the rainy darkness. His heart raced upon seeing Pacquiao's image emblazoned on a large banner at the entrance, so close yet still inaccessible. A security guard named Kidlat, with a severe expression and intimidating posture, blocked the entrance, checking credentials, and ignoring the pleas of fans who gathered, protected by colorful umbrellas, hoping to glimpse their idol. With his soaking clothes clinging to his trembling body and exhaustion threatening to deplete his last reserves of energy, Bayani timidly positioned himself in the waiting line, watching with growing apprehension as fans were systematically refused at the entrance. His legs, now almost completely without sensation due to the strenuous effort, finally gave way, causing him to fall heavily on the wet sidewalk, a small cry of pain escaping his lips as the photo of Manny slipped from his trembling hands, dancing with the rain until it stopped at the feet of a figure exiting discreetly through a side door of the gym. The figure who picked up the rain-soaked photo from the ground was Danilo, Pacquiao's personal driver for more than a decade. A man of few words and unwavering loyalty, his experienced eyes quickly assessed the fallen young man's situation, noting both his physical condition and the determination that still shone in his exhausted gaze. In a silent gesture, Danilo helped Bayani to his feet, surprising the young man with his gentle strength and the absence of pity in his treatment, a dignity that few had granted the boy throughout his life. Without asking questions, Danilo led Bayani to the car parked in the shadows, ignoring the curious glances of other fans and the silent questioning of Kidlat, the security guard, who knew well the rigorous security protocol. Inside the heated vehicle, the young man tried to control his body's trembling, while watching with growing nervousness the internal corridors of the gym through the car window, hardly believing the turn his situation had taken, fearing that at any moment he would be discovered and expelled, returning to the cruel reality of the rain-soaked streets. Dalisay, who was hurriedly walking down the corridor with a list of commitments in hand, stopped abruptly upon seeing Danilo returning with an unknown and visibly debilitated young man. Her protective instinct immediately sounded alarms, visualizing sensationalist headlines about obsessive fans and possible threats to Manny's security. With determined steps, she approached to intercept them, mentally preparing for the necessary confrontation to maintain the strict order she had established in recent weeks. The tense encounter in the corridor was interrupted by Manny himself, emerging from an adjacent meeting room, still wearing training clothes with a towel around his neck. His curious gaze alternated between the trembling young man, Dalisay's defensive expression, and Danilo's calm countenance, who simply extended the wet photo to his boss, a gesture that communicated more than words could express. The boxer observed the image for a few seconds, recognizing his own faded signature in one corner, before raising his eyes to meet Bayani's hopeful gaze. In that moment of loaded silence, something connected between the world champion and the young fan, a mutual recognition of perseverance that transcended words. Completely ignoring protocol and Dalisay's silent protests, Manny made a gesture, inviting Bayani to follow him to his private room, an honor rarely granted even to celebrities and important politicians. As they slowly walked down the corridor, adjusting to the young man's limited pace, gym staff observed with curiosity and respect, witnessing once again the humanity that had made Pacquiao much more than just a boxer in the history of the Philippines. In Manny's private room, illuminated by soft lights that contrasted with the storm outside, Bayani sat timidly on the edge of a leather armchair, fearing to wet it with his soaked clothes. The boxer noticed his discomfort and, without hesitation, offered him a set of dry clothes with his team's logo, a simple gesture that meant more than any material treasure to the young man. As Bayani changed in an adjacent locker room, his hands trembled not from cold but from pure emotion at wearing the same colors as his idol. When he returned to the room, Bayani found a small meal prepared, rice, adobo, and fresh fruits that Manny had personally requested from the gym's kitchen. The boxer watched with a gentle smile as the young man struggled to control his emotion before this unexpected hospitality. During the meal, Bayani finally found courage to share his story. The medical condition diagnosed in childhood, the painful treatments, the nights watching Pacquiao's fights on the small hospital television, finding strength to continue his own daily battle. Manny listened attentively, his eyes revealing a genuine empathy that Dalisay, discreetly observing from the door, had never witnessed before, even during the boxer's numerous public appearances. The champion recognized in the young man before him an inner strength that rivaled his own, forged not in boxing rings, but in the daily trials of a life marked by physical limitations and social prejudices. When Bayani mentioned the widowed mother who had saved for 3 years for a one-way ticket, with no possibility of return, Manny's countenance became thoughtful, as if an idea was taking shape in his mind. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Teodoro, the trainer, who respectfully reminded Manny about the unavoidable appointment with investors waiting in another room. The boxer nodded, but before leaving, made a surprising request to Dalisay to find accommodations for Bayani at the team's hotel and reorganize the next day's schedule. The press officer tried to protest, citing the rigidity of the pre-fight schedule, but fell silent upon seeing the determination in her boss's gaze, a look that had faced much more intimidating opponents than a packed agenda. That night, lying in a hotel bed more comfortable than any he had ever known, Bayani sent a text message to his mother in Samar, using the cell phone borrowed from Danilo. The words were simple, but carried an emotion that traversed the distance between them. "Mom, he is even greater than we imagined." On the other side of the city, in his own residence, Manny Pacquiao was making a series of phone calls, speaking in a low voice to avoid waking his family, planning something that would forever change the life of the young man who had traveled 500 miles just to see him. The next morning dawned with clear skies over Manila, as if the previous night's storm had washed not only the streets, but also opened the way for new beginnings. Bayani woke up disoriented, needing a few moments to believe he wasn't dreaming. The luxurious room, the dry clothes with the official logo of Pacquiao's team, the vivid memory of meeting his idol. A soft knock on the door announced Dalisay's arrival, who entered with a transformed expression, the professional rigidity of the previous day replaced by genuine respect after witnessing the interaction between Manny and the young fan. With a gentleness that surprised herself, Dalisay explained that Pacquiao had requested Bayani's presence at his morning training, a privilege rarely granted even to close family members during the intense preparation period for a fight. While helping the young man navigate the hotel corridors to the waiting car, the press officer discreetly shared that, in her 5 years working with celebrities, She had never witnessed such a sincere gesture as what Manny was demonstrating, breaking established protocols and risking his own physical preparation in the name of something she was only beginning to understand. At the gym, transformed by the morning light pouring through the large windows, Bayani was positioned in a special seat near the ring where he could observe each movement of the champion during training. Teodoro, initially skeptical about the presence of a stranger, noticed how the young man's attentive eyes followed each combination of punches with surprising technical understanding. During a hydration break, the veteran trainer approached Bayani, impressed by the insightful comments the young man made about adjustments to Manny's left guard, revealing a deep knowledge of the sport that went beyond simple fan admiration. The most extraordinary moment of the morning occurred when Manny, contradicting all security protocols, invited Bayani to climb into the ring, not to box, obviously, but to feel the energy of the sacred space where so many historical battles had been fought in training. With the gentle help of Danilo and Pacquiao, himself the young man managed to climb through the ropes, his weak legs trembling not from pain, but from pure emotion. Standing in the center of the ring, under the bright lights and surrounded by the respectful silence of the observing team, Bayani felt, for a fleeting moment, that his physical limitations had disappeared, replaced by a sensation of possibility he had never experienced before. What no one in the gym knew except Alice, who was discreetly organizing the details by phone in a distant corner, was that Manny had spent much of the previous night in contact with the best medical specialists in Manila, discussing in detail Bayani's condition based on the information the young man had shared. The boxer, known for his generosity but rarely for such personal involvement, had not only scheduled consultations with specialists for that afternoon, but also ensured that all costs would be covered, including an experimental treatment recently developed in Australia that offered promising possibilities for cases like Bayani's. The afternoon brought a sequence of surprises that Bayani could barely process. Accompanied by Danilo, who now acted as his unofficial guardian, the young man was taken to the most prestigious hospital in Manila, where a team of specialists awaited his arrival. Neurologist Dr. Agoncillo, a world authority on neuromuscular disorders, personally conducted the examinations, treating Bayani not as a charity case, but with the dignity of an important patient, explaining each procedure and treatment possibility with clarity and respect, never mentioning the costs that Manny had silently assumed. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, Manny was participating in a mandatory press conference to promote his next fight. Automatically answering familiar questions about strategies and expectations, his mind was divided, part of it still at the hospital with the young man who had traveled 500 miles with a determination that had deeply touched him. When a reporter asked about his apparent distraction, the boxer surprised everyone with a sincere response about a special fan who had taught him more about courage in one day than many opponents in the ring throughout his career, without revealing details that might expose Bayani to unwanted media attention. Late in the afternoon, Dalice received a call that made her smile for the first time in weeks. The contact Manny had activated in Australia confirmed they could receive Bayani in their experimental treatment program, with all expenses already guaranteed by an anonymous donor. The press officer, usually pragmatic to the extreme, felt an unexpected emotion visualizing the possibilities opening up for the young man, finally understanding why Pacquiao inspired such devotion in people like Bayani, who saw beyond the athlete and the celebrity. The most extraordinary moment of the day, however, was yet to come. Upon returning to the hotel, Bayani found in his room not only Manny waiting with a gentle smile, but also a familiar figure whose face dissolved into tears. Upon seeing him, his mother, Ligaya, who had been brought from Samar on a private flight personally arranged by the boxer. The emotional reunion between mother and son, marked by desperate embraces and words broken by sobs, was silently witnessed by Manny, who remained discreetly at a distance, allowing them to share that intimate moment. When it was finally his turn to speak, Manny explained with simplicity what he had organized: the treatment program in Australia, the already reserved tickets, accommodation guaranteed for 6 months, financial support so Ligaya could accompany her son without worries about work or sustenance, faced with the emotional protests of the woman, who insisted she could not accept such generosity. The boxer shared something deeply personal, how his own mother had sacrificed everything to support his dreams when no one else believed in him, and how each victory he conquered in the rings was a way to honor that sacrifice just as now. Helping Bayani was his way of recognizing the same unbreakable strength he saw in both the young man and Ligaya. The following days passed in a whirlwind of preparations, medical examinations and documentation necessary for the trip to Australia. Dalisay, completely converted to the cause, coordinated each detail with the same efficiency she applied to Manny's career, finding genuine satisfaction in seeing Bayani's eyes shining with renewed hope, with each new piece of information about the innovative treatment awaiting him. In the intervals between consultations and bureaucratic procedures, Danilo took charge of showing Ligaya the tourist spots of Manila, allowing the dedicated mother to experience, perhaps for the first time in her life, moments of pure pleasure, without the constant concern for daily survival. On the eve of Manny's big fight, a private dinner was organized in the presidential suite of the hotel, bringing together the boxer, his family, Bayani and Ligaya in an intimate celebration that transcended social and economic differences. Pacquiao's children immediately adopted the young visitor, completely ignoring his physical condition, including him in their games with the uncomplicated naturalness of childhood. Observing the scene, Ligaya discreetly shared with Manny's wife how that simple acceptance was a gift as valuable as the medical treatment, as it restored in her son something that years of social isolation had slowly eroded, the feeling of belonging. The next morning, contrary to all pre-fight traditions he had religiously followed for decades, Manny insisted on personally accompanying Bayani, Ligaya and Danilo to the airport. In the emotional farewells at the international terminal, the young man, gathering all his courage, gave the boxer a modest gift, a handcrafted wooden rosary that had belonged to his late father, his most precious possession and the only tangible memory of the man he had never known. Manny received the gift with visible emotion, perfectly understanding the profound meaning of that gesture, silently promising to carry it with him in the ring that night. Hours later, in the dressing room before the fight, while his technical team finalized preparations, Manny sat in silence for a few minutes, Bayani's rosary intertwined in his bandaged fingers. Dalisay, observing discreetly, understood that she was witnessing something rare. A man at the peak of his career, about to face one of the greatest sporting challenges of his life, finding strength not only in his extraordinary physical ability or in the crowd shouting his name, but in the genuine human connection with a young man who had crossed his path by chance, or perhaps, as Manny would certainly believe, for a greater divine purpose. 6 months later, when Bayani returned to the Philippines walking with the aid of only a light cane, an improvement that the Australian doctors classified as remarkable, he was received at the airport not only by Danilo and Dalisay, but by Manny Pacquiao himself, who had just announced his retirement from the rings to dedicate himself entirely to political life and social projects. Among them, a newly inaugurated rehabilitation center for young people with physical disabilities in Samar, built on the land next to the small house where Bayani and Ligaya had lived all their lives, and for which the young man had been invited to work as coordinator, transforming his own journey of overcoming into inspiration for hundreds of others who, like him, needed only an opportunity to show their true strength. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to our channel.